So we'll be digging into the spending review in just a few moments, but first, yesterday the Prime Minister announced a new national inquiry into grooming gangs. Sir Keir Starmer had previously dismissed calls for one, saying it would delay justice for victims, but he now says it's the right thing to do after a report by Baroness Louise Casey. So I'll come to you first on this. Chris, what's your reaction?
This is the right decision. You know, this is a leading expert telling us we now need a national inquiry. She originally said we didn't need one, we needed to get on with implementing the 2022 recommendations, which we started. But after looking at the evidence and going back further, she's gone to the Prime Minister, he's read the report cover to cover, and now says, right, let's get on with it.
Well, this is a Prime Minister who was adamant this wasn't needed for weeks, if not months, and even suggested anyone calling for it was an extremist.
Well, he never ruled it out, but he said we've got to be led by the experts and support victims. The victims have been let down for far too long. Of all the recommendations in the report that came out in 2022, not a single one was implemented. So the priority of us was to get them implemented, to get that working for victims and to give them the support. But now, with the leading expert, Baroness Casey, saying we need a national, we've got to get on with it.
Sarah, this is something Reform was campaigning for.
Absolutely. And once again, we see our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, U-turning thanks to pressure put on the Labour Party by Reform UK. So Nigel Farage has been calling for a national inquiry into the Grooming Gangs scandal. Keir Starmer, even in January, was calling us far-right for having those views. How can he possibly defend his situation? Did he really need a report to tell us that we need an investigation into this? We have known that the social contract in this country is broken under this Labour government and also under the previous Tory government. And if I can just say, what you read about what has happened to these girls is absolutely... I mean, I was nearly in tears reading some of the reports about the rapes, the multiple men on single children, you know, being raped. These are our children.
The argument the Prime Minister and Labour was making, though, wasn't it, was that actually recommendations from the previous report hadn't been implemented. Is there any concern that this does delay justice further? We
know what's happening. There is a denial of this, and again, the last government, no, they haven't implemented or put into place those recommendations. And I wonder what the timings are going to be on this latest inquiry. Like you say, let's not push this into the long grass. We need to know when this is going to happen, when these changes are going to be making. But because believe me, this latest ruling was from some time ago. But this is going on now. This is still going on now. We cannot deny it. Our children, white British girls, are being raped by Pakistani misogynistic men, and this has got to stop.
Chris?
I'd say we put votes in Parliament. Reform at every step have voted against us getting justice for victims and support for those victims. That has to be the priority here. Not calling out politics or politics. This is about getting justice.
This does go back, doesn't it? And there has been a pushback and a pushback and a pushback about this kind of investigation to really get to the root of the issue.
There has, but we've been led by the leading experts in this, not politicians trying to get a soundbite. This is by leading people that have done years and years of investigations, speaking to victims, working with the police and other organisations. That's what's come out over the last few days. PM's listening to that recommendation, is enacting on. That's what we want from a Prime Minister who takes it from the experts and leads on it. But, you know, we've got a track record of getting on with this when we've come into government after years of inactivity. That has to be the priority for victims, not dog whistle politics.
Quick response, Sarah.
We know that the other thing that needs to come out of this investigation now is calling to account and making people and charging people for the police, the social workers, the councils that have all been complicit in allowing this abuse of our children to carry on. And why have they been complicit? Because they were too worried about being called racist if they called out these Pakistani men. They were too worried about the social unrest that could result.
On Pakistani men? We know from
You're in denial, Chris.
We're not in what I'm saying is, you look at the stats, we know it isn't just Pakistani men.
Oh, my God.
There is white individuals and others with other faiths and backgrounds that are doing this horrific stuff that needs to be brought to justice.
Here we go, we have a Labour politician defending the Pakistani Pakistani community because that's your votes, Chris. That's your votes.
Well, you'll have a look at Blackpool. It's a bit different demographic. What I'm saying is, I don't hear about talking about everyone else. I'm not saying it's a part of it, but it seems to be the focus, not about all of these. These are horrific individuals, no matter their background, no matter where they're from, no matter their ethnicity. They need to be locked up. They need to feel...
We agree on that. They need to be locked up. But you can't deny that the majority of these gangs are Pakistani men that we are talking about, and it has not been... I'm raising it as a Reform MP because you're in denial because it's your votes.
All right, we're going to have to leave that there. So I'm sure all this will come out as the investigation into it moves forward. Now, we saw the Chancellor earlier this week announcing the contents of a spending review which sets the day-to-day budgets of government departments as well as investment projects, and we'll dive into the details, or lack of them, in a moment. But first, a quick summary of the key points. Well, the day-to-day budget for the NHS will increase by 3% in real terms on average over the next 3 years, reaching £226 billion by 2029. The schools budget in England will go up by 0.4% in real terms, reaching £69.5 billion by 2029, which includes extending free school meals to around 500,000 more children and funding pay rises and building repairs. So the overall budget remains tight there. There will be an extra £280 million to tackle small boat crossings and £7 billion to create 14,000 more prison places. But the Home Office day-to-day budget will fall by 1.7% over 3 years, and any extra police officers may have to be funded by council tax increases. The Chancellor also announced £39 billion of investment on social and affordable housing over the next decade and £15.6 billion for transport projects in the regions, including those extra tram lines and electric buses here in the North West. So lots of big numbers announced by Rachel Reeves, but what does it mean for us in our region? Well, joining us on the sofa is Ashwin Kumar, Research and Policy Director of the left-leaning think tank, the IPPR North. So was this a good spending review for our region?
I think what was really important is the beginning of capital spending, investment in public services, transport, schools. There'll be money for school rebuilding, more money for investment in better tech and better buildings in the NHS. One of the problems about the UK is that, you know, for instance, you look at our health service, we probably spend as much on day-to-day spending on kind of staff salaries as other countries, but we've often not invested. And one of the problems that this government inherited was that the previous government had rules that effectively stopped them investing as much as they should have done. We've now got a better situation. We've finally got some delivery on the promises of transport in the north, and we're going to have a better, you know, investment in schools. I think it's a good budget from the point of view of capital investment. Even though day-to-day spending won't be growing ginormously, there'll be steady increases whilst we have got this capital to invest.
Sarah, what did you make of it?
Well, look, if this money is around, then great. But one, how long is it going to take to come through? And secondly, I'm concerned about whether the money is actually ever going to come through. Not let alone, we know that this government has lost control of public finances. We know that within your manifesto, it said that you would increase public spending by 10 million. Already in the first quarter, it's gone up by 60 million. We cannot sustain that situation. So yes, this all sounds great, but where's the money coming from?
And there are questions from opponents that all this money is going to inevitably lead to tax rises in the autumn. Do you accept that, Chris?
No. So the money that was outlined this week in spending review was money that was set out in the budget. This was a great day for constituencies like mine. Blackpool's named more than anywhere else in the country in the spending review. We're undoing years and years of finances being directed to wealthy constituencies, as Rishi Sunak was caught under that video many years ago, and deprived areas like Blackpool. I've got the second most deprived constituency in the UK, the most deprived borough in England. We need that investment, and this government now is focusing on those deprived areas. That's why Blackpool's got money for housing, it's got money for our neighbourhoods, it's got money for our schools, it's got money for our NHS at a time we desperately need it.
Is it going to improve people's lives quickly, though? Because you're up against it. There's an election coming in a few years.
So we've got the crack team in our NHS getting the waiting list down, and we're seeing that now. with waiting lists coming down right across the country. First time waiting lists have dropped in April in 17 years. People are getting access to their GP. We're repairing the crumbling schools. All of this, people will start seeing change in their communities. And essentially as well, with Bobbies on the beat, we will now see your neighbourhood Bobby back in just a few weeks in Blackpool.
We'll come back to police later, but you're shaking your head there.
Absolutely. Talking about waiting lists coming down, again, you're in denial. We know why they're coming down, because people get issued an appointment, then it gets cancelled. We know that that's happening, and then they can't get another appointment. You only have to do some research into it to know that you are fudging the figures when it comes to the NHS. And the other big thing on the NHS is there's an announcement of 29 million in this spending review for the NHS. What is the point of putting good money after bad money? It's unless you reform the system, unless you make big changes in how the NHS works, this is just money going into a black hole. It won't make any difference.
OK, Ashwin, come in. So 29 billion.
It's 29 billion.
29 billion
sorry,
extra.
what did I say? Million.
For the NHS. I mean, is that money going to have the desired impact, or is it a black hole?
We can, as Chris said, we have already started to see waiting lists come down, but there's clearly much more to do. So the 10-year plan for the NHS is coming out on the 2nd of July, and that'll talk about trying to move more from treatment to prevention, moving more services towards the community. So the government is talking about reform. We haven't yet seen the plans. We'll need to see that they're realistic plans and that they're able to deliver, but they're saying exactly the right things about what needs to change so that this money starts to have an impact. But the other thing that I think is significant is that there'll be more money for technology, more money for investment in the equipment that our staff in the NHS use. So they're less fighting with old systems, and which makes it harder for them to treat us as well as they could.
Final quick one to you on this, Chris. This week we've got the infrastructure plan. There's been hints about rail infrastructure. How much of a body blow will it be to the North West if actually it's all talk again and no money is committed to this Crossrail for the North?
Well, if you look, we've announced over 15 billion for transport projects outside London. That's right. There's always been that inequality. The South has always got more than the North. We need more rail investment, not just in Liverpool and Manchester, but many of us in the Red Wall Group have been looking at train lines towards places like Blackpool, Fleetwood and other areas that have been forgotten about, those towns that were left to neglect by the previous government.
Can I just say something on that? I think one of the things that's really important that the government has done is it's announced 5-year budgets which are going to be given to mayors to decide to spend, whereas previously transport spending was always about places around the country, places in the north, having to apply and beg for the money to the Department for Transport in London. Handing the money to mayors on a 5-year basis for them to get on and spend is a really significant change, because it means that we'll have more control over what happens in the northwest.
And that's why Lancashire needs a mayor urgently.
OK, right. We'll come back to that maybe. Now, alongside housing, transport and healthcare, the Chancellor pledged £200 million to cut the asylum backlog and return people who have no right to be here, she said. Let's hear from her.
We are tackling the asylum backlog. The party opposite left behind a broken system. Billions of pounds of taxpayers' money spent on housing asylum seekers in hotels, leaving people in limbo and shunting the cost of failure onto local communities. We won't let that stand. So I can confirm today that, led by the work of my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, we will be ending the costly use of hotels to house asylum seekers in this Parliament.
So, extra money there. Chris, how are you going to do it?
So I can't welcome this announcement enough. So the hotel that was used in my constituency is a hotel. It's the reason I'm here. My mum moved to Blackpool to become a Redco at that hotel, and now it's been an asylum hotel since 2021, when the previous government told us it'd only be used for 3 months. I opposed it, the council opposed it, yet the previous government put it in. We've been saying that needs to close as
Where are you going to put
possible.
people, though?
So this is about processing. So we know we've got a huge backlog left by the previous government. They lost control of our borders, pure and simple. We've now got to get on with the hard work of rolling our sleeves up, processing these people that are claiming asylum. If they have the right to remain, then they're integrated into society. If not, they're then returned home. We've got to get through those waiting lists down. That's the problem, and that needs the extra 1,000 caseworkers that we're using this money for to actually do the hard work, not just sound bites, not just rhetoric, getting on with that job, and we're seeing that. We've got record planes out across into different countries around the world returning people, and we've returned nearly 30,000 people already. We're getting on with the job.
Could this money make a difference, Sarah?
Look, this government is absolutely, it's all words, it's all sound bites. We know that the government is buying hotels to put these illegal immigrants in now. So in my constituency...
So you're saying it'd be a change of name, essentially?
Yeah, in my constituency, I have an illegal immigrant hotel, as you know. I campaigned hard on it in the by-election. It's one of the reasons you lost that election. I actually think there's another one, but I'm investigating whether that's happening. Now, I know that... because of the private landlord scheme that you've introduced, whereby private landlords, if they give up their properties for 5 years, get guaranteed rent, all repairs done, British people, my residents in Runcorn and Helsby, are being issued with Section 21 notices to get out of their accommodation and illegal immigrants have been moved in.
What would reform do instead?
Hold on. I know as well that even YMCA residents are being evicted, illegals moved in. So it's happening all over Runcorn. I know it's happening. These HMOs are absolute beds of crime.
What would you do instead, though, if you were in charge?
We will leave the European Convention of Human Rights. You can laugh, Chris, but none of this lot are getting deported. None of them are getting sent home unless we're out of the European Court of Human Rights, and that's what reform will do.
Chris, about 60% of the people here ordinarily will get leave to remain, won't they? So is that just a situation the Labour government will push through, or would they do something differently?
We've got to look at processing these claims as quickly as possible. As I say, the Tories lost control of the board.
As I say, yeah, but 60% of the ones you process will
we've got to get
here.
a process that I can't go about stats because we don't know what they're all going through that appeal process now. But we need to get on with that hard job. You know, it's all right just saying we can leave the ECHR and that's going to solve all our problems. It's not. People are claiming asylum. We're working with France. We've got a new deal with France, so now we can tackle them in the shallow waters.
Oh, that's
we need to stop them.
Chris.
But that's the real hard about smashing the gangs, not just rhetoric, delivering.
Just bring Ashwin in quickly. I mean, a lot of money has been spent on this. I think your organisations argue that it should be spent differently and better.
Yeah, there's two problems. Basically, the previous government effectively gave up on processing a whole load of asylum claims, and that increased the backlog, and so we had to spend a lot more on accommodating people. The second problem is that we have these national contracts for the accommodation, and we've got kind of national companies like Clear Springs who've got no interest in what happens in local communities. So we've said that we should give this job to local authorities, make sure they're funded properly to do it, so that they can take into account the local community circumstances. They can kind of find accommodation that's more appropriate for the local area. Because at the moment what's happening is these national companies are just doing things without any concern for what happens in communities, what people locally think. And there's an opportunity to actually deal with this. The contracts have a break clause in 2026, and we think that those break clauses should be exercised so that we can give the job to local authorities and it's done more in cooperation with local communities.
Sarah, the long-term solution from reform, as you say, leaving the ECHR, but what would you do quickly now to improve things?
What Ashwin wants to do, and I know, I mean, I did a bit of research into you, Ashwin, is to accommodate all of these people and integrate them into the community. It just doesn't happen. As soon as they get in these HMOs, which I have plenty of in my constituency, they are lost to the authorities. I have CCTV evidence of drug dealing, of knife crime, of prostitution. I have seen it. I have residents terrified to they won't let their children play outside.
What would reform do about it?
We gather them up, put them in a deportation centre and send them home.
What deportation centres? I think, again, it's all rhetoric and no action.
That would be expensive, would it not, building detention centres?
Expensive. It costs us £45,000 a year to house these illegal immigrants. What are we doing? That's taxpayers' money. That's all of our money.
Part of the problem, though, is that amount, is actually 41,000, has gone up by 2.5 times in the course of about 4 years, because we've got these national contracts where these companies have got no interest in doing things more cheaply, more effectively, and more in cooperation with local communities.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so, we don't have to be spending the kinds of money that we are spending if we manage this better. We process the claims and we let communities have a say in what happens.
We're going to have to move on. Now, with an annual 18 million visitors heading to the Lake District, its nighttime economy continues to grow, but so too are the problems with rowdiness. In response, Cumbria Police has set up a welfare hub to support anyone affected by antisocial behaviour or domestic violence on nights out, including spiking of drinks. Chris, according to the spending review, there could be cuts to policing unless councils put the taxes up.
So we've got a guarantee for neighbourhood policing. We've committed to bringing the neighbourhood bobby back in every community. We're going to see that in Lancashire in just a few weeks. We're going to see that right across the country.
But police chiefs were saying don't take money from us, and then you went and did it.
Well, I think for us, it's looking at the budget, and for me, we need to secure and make sure we've got the funding for our police. As a former Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, I know how vital that is. But unfortunately, there has been a shift over the years for the previous government where council tax was making around 30% of the budget for Lancashire Police. What we need is to properly invest, and that's why we've ring-fenced the neighbourhood policing. That's what the public want, the bobby on the beat, in their patch, so visible and contactable.
Sarah?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I agree with Chris in that we want to see more police on the streets, anything we can do to improve women's safety when they're out. But women also need to be aware of their own safety. You know, you just need to be, we were talking about spiking of drinks in that introduction and things. Just be careful where you are with your drinks, things like that. People, you know, women have to be more self-aware as well. But yeah, any increase in protection for women's safety, I'm obviously going to agree with.
Ashwin, is there some concern about long-term funding for police?
Well, I think the other issue is the court system. We've had huge backlogs in the court system. So actually having a functioning criminal justice system will mean that the police are able to do their job more effectively, and hopefully the steady increases in budget will help with that.
Chris, in terms of this anti-social behaviour, this is a real blight on some communities, though, isn't it? And again, something you will be judged on as a government.
Definitely. Blackpool has been suffering for this for many years because of police cuts. We're still not at 2010 levels of policing in Lancashire. Blackpool needs it. I've been calling for that nationally and with the Police and Crime Commissioner. We're committed to getting that. Bobby's back on the beat, working with communities. We'll see 13,000 new neighbourhood police soon.
Very quickly, Sarah, would you be putting more money to police?
There's money there, because it comes back to every point that this government's out of control when it comes to spending. I just hope the money's there for this initiative.
Right, well, thank you, guys. That's been good. So we've had a good chat there, lots of topics covered. I'm sure there'll be more to come in terms of the spending review as people do work out all the finer details as it emerges over the coming days and weeks. So that's it from us. My thanks to Chris Webb, Sarah Porchin and Ashwin Kumar. Join us again at the same time next week. We'll hopefully see you then.